thanks for coming. You may not believe this or not, but anxiety is a part of my everyday life. In fact, anxiety of teaching and speaking, particularly when it's being recorded, is one of the most anxiety-provoking things that I do on a daily basis. I'm glad you're here. And yes, I want to talk about anxiety and what I have learned by way of my practice to manage the emotions and even the condition of anxiety.
Hello there.
Hi, welcome. You caught me taking a moment to center and to feel into my body. And that's particularly important today for me because the story that I want to share is the story of anxiety, my relationship with anxiety. And not everyone's friend, anxiety, can be befriended. In fact, I spent decades trying to shed and rid this wise, not always kind teacher we call anxiety. So I try to arrive, particularly at those places that are anxiety tickling, and believe it or not, teaching. More importantly, authentically sharing what matters to me in a way that is both being vulnerable and captured on video for later reproduction and sharing on an open platform like YouTube. So don't think for a moment that because I have a business and I make my living and I am a professional, qualified, trained, experienced teacher, that I don't get anxiety. In fact, the truth of the matter is, if I don't have a little bit of anxiety, a little bit of anxiousness every time I come to teach, every time I step on my mat to lead a practice for others, every time I come to the camera to record a lesson, if I show up and I don't have that little bit, just a little bit of anxiety, I know, based on my experience, that it's because I'm not showing up fully. When I show up fully, when I show up awkwardly, authentically, in it, there's always going to be a bit of anxiety because there's a bit of risk. A risk it won't go like I imagine. A risk it won't land where I want it to land. Risk that I won't be able to find the words, let alone the breath, to connect. There's two practices that I do every single day. And the more that I do them, the more anxiety stays at bay in terms of it becoming a hindrance, becoming a problem in my life. In other words, anxiety can be normal in stressful situations, and sharing authentically, being vulnerable and leading others, teaching others is one of the most common anxiety-provoking conditions in our modern world, that of public speaking. But when it becomes dis-ease, when it becomes a disorder, is when it impacts us so negatively that we can't function. And for me, I haven't had an anxiety attack for almost 6 years. It'll be May of this year, my 6th year anniversary. And that's really saying something given all that we've endured as a global society with the 2019 COVID pandemic. And in that time frame, others like myself being self-employed, and specifically self-employed in the service and touch industry, have had to redefine ourselves, have to shift the way in which we show up, and even protect ourselves in terms of how do I feel nourished when I can't give in the way that I am designed and trained and prefer to serve, to give. So yes, anxiety by definition is intense, excessive, persistent worry and fear about everyday situations. What's the most everyday situation in my world? It's teaching yoga. That's what I spend the most of my time doing. And yet, one might think that eventually I get over my anxiety. But really, anxiety is a component of how we all function. It's the way in which our body-mind communicates to say, this is risky. This is exciting. This has the potential to be life-changing. But isn't that what life is about? About facilitating those opportunities for connection and union and growth? At least it is for me. And that's why I said that when I don't have that tickle of anxiety, when I come to the camera, when I come to the yoga mat, when I show up to meet a new student, I know that that's really an early indication of disengagement. And disengagement looks different for different people. For me, it's kind of phoning it in, right? I can still go through all of the motions, but there's a flatness, a flat lineness. We all know that when the heart monitor flatlines is not a good sign for our vitality and well-being. But nor is it a good thing in terms of our inspiration for daily living. Last month, I taught virtually to a group of people whom I didn't know. It was a solicitation to share and to teach in a service component. And I got all sorts of anxious. But it didn't trigger anxiety, partly because I do my daily practice, and partly because practice cultivates confidence and competence. So what are those daily practices? Or maybe you're more interested in my last anxiety attack because that's more relatable. Well, I got good news for you because I'm going to share both, but not today. Today, I want to tell you the strategies that I use to help keep anxiety at bay. And next Tuesday, I will, in fact, relive to a certain extent my own last anxiety attack, not to hopefully relive that experience, but rather to learn again and to remember what those strong experiences have to teach us. Now, all of this is being shared in the light of having launched my 2022 teacher training program and asking my students to show up is the beginning. That's really all that's required. But then I invite them to also tickle the edge of their own sense of confidence and competence by doing things that are outside their norm, that are baby steps towards the idea of not only public speaking, but also sharing what matters most, the practice of yoga, and sharing it as a way that we are an advocate, an ambassador, a guide, a teacher of yoga. So keep in mind that if you are unable to function, to do the things that need to be done in your day because of anxiety, then see your doctor, please. Find help. But if your anxiety makes it just uncomfortable, right? For me, I used to peel the skin around my thumb. I would get so anxious I couldn't breathe and I would literally pass out. Not an effective strategy if you want to teach, right? So I jumped in whole hog, so to speak, and I practiced public speaking and teaching and creating content with which I could share. And that happened very early in my coming of age. But with all of that practice and all of that study, even working with a therapist, working with occupational therapists in terms of physical therapy for how I hold my body and the tensions that's held, what has worked the best for me in managing my anxiety has so much to do with yoga, because it is primarily two practices. The first of which is breathing mindfully, breathing in ways in which, yes, I can tickle the edges of my comfort, but more importantly, I tickle those edges so I can come back to remember the power of breath in its simplicity, to nourish, to sustain, to support us. And the second practice is maybe not exactly a yoga practice, but it's all yoga to me. And that is the practice of gratitude. But really, the practice of gratitude is simply a strategy for meditation that gives me a place to land. Tangibly, I use a book, right? I use a journal to write 3 daily gratitudes. My husband knows this is such a big part of my practice that he bought me this shirt, Give Thanks. Whether you call it Thanksgiving, whether you call it meditation, whether you call it prayer, taking time to mentally practice being in what is meditation, and is an opportunity to reset not only your body-mind connection, your neurological parasympathetic nervous system. It's a way to befriend anxiety herself when she shows up, because it's anxiety that brings with her the invitation to tickle the edge of confidence and competence. And by repetition, more often than not, as needed and when it's scheduled, we can flex these muscles and get more and more comfortable with the uncomfortable, whether that's the breathing, whether that's the moving, whether that's the resting. What is it that you respond best to? I chose gratitude and breathing partly because the research tells me that those are two of the primary practices that help cultivate happiness and joy, but also because they required no outside tools and props. I can literally do them anywhere and no one has to know. So I will often start my practice, not unlike today, with a few grounded breaths just to settle in, to close my eyes and check in, and even recite to myself an affirmation, which is just another form of gratitude. Remembering why I do what I do and how grateful I am that I get to do this every day and that I get to share it with you, because in that sharing, we pool our resources and we can remember and be reminded about what matters most if we should lose our way. So, 2 secrets for me: breathing and gratitude. Befriend the breath, befriend the strong emotion, because it has something to teach you. And it's in that learning, another one of the 10 key practices to inspired living, to living intimately with inspiration and joy, is to stay learning, engaged in learning new things, new strategies, new knowledge, new facts, new relationships. Doesn't matter, but stay in that learning relationship. And you might just find yourself in a greater state of joy, of abundance, of love. So we begin again and we breathe. Join me for book club as we continue to talk about breath and the research shared from James Nestor, or come see me for practice, whether it's a just breathe practice, a just move, breathe, and rest practice, or even just an opportunity to connect and ask the questions of what inspires you. This is yoga living, and this is what I'm here to support you in doing to the capacity the well accessible, repetitive practice of living. Take care of each other, and I hope to see you soon. Namaste.